What is happening, everybody? It is Trey here, joined today by my dad Sean, and today reactions to the classics. We got a big one, the Velvet Underground and Nico's debut record, the Velvet Underground, and it is one of the more acclaimed records of the 60s and all time, and I wasn't familiar with any of the tracks.
I'd heard one of them, that's it.
So I was interested to dive into this, and I'm glad we did, and it's your first time stopping by the channel. We appreciate it. Here at Reactions to the Classics, we take a look back at some of the most classic albums of all time, do detailed track-by-track reviews. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And if you'd like to link up with us more, we got our Facebook group as well as our Patreon, where you can support us for as little as $1 a month down below. And all that to say, let's get into the quick facts of this record.
Yeah, this was their debut album, as you mentioned. It was released in March of 1967 by Verve Records. It's number 13 on the Rolling Stones top 500 albums of all time. And Trey, when we looked at that list, when we started this journey about a year ago, that was the one I looked at and like, I don't even know who that is. Yeah. So that was interesting to me. Also interesting that I have not come across an album on our journey like this, in that it only sold 30,000 copies like initially and for a long time there. So it was not a commercial success at all.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a critical success, and it only became a critical success like 10 years after. So it's one of those rare things where something is transformative. There's certain publications have named it the most influential album of all time, which is really a bold statement.
Yeah, the Brian Eno has that famous quote where he said it might have only sold 30,000 copies, but everybody who listened to that record started 30,000 bands because of the influence.
Because of the album. So they didn't make any money off this. They didn't make a fortune off this. They didn't go on some huge tour. So an influential album like this, that high up, that nobody got rich off of. Many subgenres of rock music and forms of alternative music were significantly influenced by the album, including art rock, punk, garage, goth, and indie. It was recorded with Lou Reed, John Cale, Sterling Morrison, and Maureen Tucker. And at the instigation of Andy Warhol, who was backing them at first, they added Nico, the German singer, to lead 3 of the lead vocals on this, and she sings backup on another, and that's how you get the Velvet Underground and Nico. And actually, Andy Warhol is the only credited producer on this, but he didn't do anything but lend his name to it, and he helped finance the initial recording session. But Reed said later on, he did produce it in a way, in the fact that because he was Andy Warhol, they could walk into a studio with Andy and they could do whatever they wanted because they were there with Andy Warhol.
Yeah, so
I mean,
popular at that time.
Yeah, like nobody wanted to mess with Andy, so they could do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, and Lou Reed wrote the majority of the lyrics here, and a lot of it deals with some taboo subjects, especially for the mid to late 60s.
Yeah, that's why it didn't go over, because they didn't get any promotion. They weren't being advertised. Record stores didn't want to sell them.
Yeah, we have, Frank talk about sexual topics, especially heavy into the
drugs, man,
as well. And Lou said that he didn't come in with the idea of, I'm going to use shock value for this. He was a big fan of poetry and just thought fusing the topics that he read in poetry with rock and roll music, 2 things that he loved, would make for a nice sound, nice composition, and that's essentially what we got. He said, well, if you like to read about it, why wouldn't you like to listen to it? And it kind of makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And one of the problems with the sales of this is the original album cover, they only produced it for a few months. Then they pulled it off the market, and they didn't re-release the album for 5-6 months, right? So any little bit of momentum they had, which wasn't much, got killed. The album cover is very famous. It's a banana painted by Andy Warhol, but the very first ones had a peel here, and you peeled it back, and it was a flesh-colored banana under it. I'll let your imagination, whatever you want that to mean. So if you have one of those originals, then you might be onto something there money-wise. So all of these issues with the delays and all these things eventually caused Lou Reed to fire Andy Warhol the next year as their manager. They hired a new manager who pushed them in the direction of more mainstream music, not so much controversial stuff. They kicked Nico out of the band. She went on to just a solo career, and that's going to take us into the album. Well, the first song on here is Sunday Mornings, released as a single, as a final song to be recorded. It was requested by Tom Wilson, one of the producers, because he wanted a more single sounding song that they could release. He wanted Nico to be on vocals. So Cale and Reed wrote this at like 3 o'clock in the morning one night when they were pretty strung out. Nico sang it live when they were rehearsing it, but then when they went into the studio, Lou actually sang it, and Nico sang backing vocals.
Yeah, and it is a great way to start off the record.
So chill, man.
It really is. It honestly reminds you and sets the atmosphere of like a hazy Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning rather that you're going through. It has a lullaby like.
It does. And there's an instrument called a celesta that Cale saw in the corner of the recording studio. Had never played it, and that's what you hear on here, that interesting sound.
And I think that's the Celesta does lend to that lullaby.
Yeah, it is just a
nature to
dream-like.
And it is interesting because the lyrics themselves are pretty depressing. One line in particular, it's just those wasted years so close behind. Partway through the song, Reed's vocals kind of like echo.
Yes.
So I this was one of my favorite songs on the record, and I would say
Mine
it's
too.
probably the most, like you said, pop-oriented track. So if you listen to this first song, you're like, oh, okay, this is gonna be kind of interesting pop wise, but then as you go through the record, you'll see
there's such vast differences in it. That takes us to the second track, I'm Waiting for the Man. It's number 159 on the Rolling Stones top 500 songs of all time. This is the song I've heard. It's been in some commercials. I think that's where I've heard it. It wasn't some huge hit or anything. None of these were. The man is actually the slang term for the heroin dealer. So he crosses New York into a different part of town, and he is waiting for the heroin dealer to come. He talks about it. He paid $26 for it, and Lou didn't come right out and say that this was autobiographical, but he said the only thing incorrect in this song is the $26. Yeah. So I think it's a banger. I really enjoyed it, and it's quite different from the last track.
Absolutely, and the story is just fantastic on here.
Yeah.
Just going through, noting like what a heroin addict would be going through.
Yes.
They're just waiting for that next fix. The dealer, the man's always late, but hey, you got to wait for him anyway, hoping to get that next fix and get rocking. And so, yeah, again, one of my favorites on this record.
Next up is Femme Fatale, lead vocals by Nico on this one. At the request of Warhol, he asked Lou Reed to sing a song about maybe Warhol's most famous person in his entourage, Edie Sedgwick, who tragically died when she was only 28 years old, OD'd. And Lou said, well, Andy, what do you want me to write about her? And he said, well, she's a rather femme fatale, don't you think? And that's why Lou wrote this song. It's a short song. It almost has like a, I don't know, it just sticks in your head, man. She's a femme fatale.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally agree with you. This was my favorite of the Nico tracks on here.
Yeah.
She has a very unique, distinct voice.
Yeah, she does.
And it was interesting here because the woman is actually in power.
Very much.
And she's kind of just poking fun almost at this guy that who is just under her gaze.
Got him on a string, man.
Absolutely. She notes that she's going to smile to make you frown. What a clown. Yeah, really playing with this guy. So I enjoyed it. Like you said, a shorter track, and then that moves us on to track number 4.
Venus in Furs, which was inspired by a book of the same name that Lou liked. And it includes sexual themes, including bondage and submission. So the arrangement, what stands out on this is Cale's electric viola. And then also Reed came up with this technique himself called the ostrich guitar. You tune all the strings to one note. So those are things that stand out in here.
Yeah, the spooky vibe just starts off right away with that viola in there. It's an electric viola. It's not something I was too familiar with, but it pops up a lot here from Cale. Obviously, again, just adds to the gritty themes. We introduce another taboo subject matter.
Yeah, we do.
In here.
Yeah.
Who was saying, name drop some characters in there. Just goes kind of in the chorus with the theme, saying that he's weary, he's weak. This is the track that grew on me the most through repeated listens. Once I really got into the musical backing of it, I dug it actually quite a bit.
Yeah, and now, Trey, you know what it's time for? It's time to run, run, run. Ooh. And this is a song that Lou wrote on the back of an envelope while they were sitting in a van on their way to a gig through New York City.
You know who this vocal delivery reminded me of? Somebody very prominent in the the mid 60s as well. Bob Dylan. This totally reminded me of Dylan.
You know what? I see that.
Yeah, with the vocal delivery, Lou was a little different on here, and he name drops like a bunch of characters, has a little bit of a
4 different characters
of a surreal nature to it, and it just notes how drug abuse and addiction has impacted each one.
Yes,
as one of the characters overdoses at the end, she's all blue. So very again, just it's no holds barred. It's telling the drug culture how it was, especially at that time. I thought it was a great vocal performance.
Yeah, and I think they manipulate the instrumentation on this song to make you feel like you're in the moment, and that's something I really like that they did there. That brings us to another Nico's lead vocals, All Tomorrow's Parties. And Lou Reed talked about writing this. He wrote it because he was around Warhol a lot and Warhol's people. And it was like written from an observation standpoint of just watching him. And he said he heard the craziest things, he saw the craziest things, heard the saddest things, and that's what he wrote this about. And there's some instrumentation on here that's pretty interesting. He brings the ostrich guitar to this, but Cale also brings some stuff.
Yeah, we have a piano motif that's brought throughout here, based largely on tone clusters. It also was one of the first pop songs to make use of the prepared piano, where they had chains of paper clips were intertwined with the piano strings, and that really does give it a unique sound.
It's awesome,
in
man.
Here. So for me, the highlight was that instrumentation, how all of this, you had the tambourine as well.
Yes.
And just gave it a very unique backing. Nico's vocals here were, again, just very distinct. And with the subject of the song, Thursday's Child, goes in and just continues to go. She's trying to fit in kind of with the people of the day. And at the end, she just kind of goes into some self-destructive habits.
Yes.
And it's noted that no one mourns for her. She's fit for one who sits and cries for all tomorrow's parties. And, you know, just when you think you've made it at the top and are ready to fit in, tomorrow's parties is going to have a different, you know, type of look and atmosphere and audience that you're going to have to fit in with. So I thought that was interesting. Not one of my favorite tracks on here. But,
I actually liked it a decent amount.
But I still appreciated it.
Well, a couple tracks ago, Trey, it was time to run. It is not time now to do Heroin. However, it is time for the song Heroin. And this is one of the things, obviously, that brought him some heat. This is a long song. It's a tremendous song. Reed actually wrote it back in 1964. They recorded it in 66. He wrote it when he was still a student at Syracuse University, and he was a songwriter for record companies. He used to shut you in the room. That's how Elton John and Bernie Taupin came together. They shut you in a room, and you're writing all these songs, banging them out. He said, I had about 10 songs to write that day, and so I wrote this one. And so he took it to the record company, and they said, not now, not ever.
Yeah, for me, this was definitely the highlight of the entire
record.
It's
fantastic.
From first listen, I was just blown away by it, and it was the song I replayed the most, even after listening to the album multiple times. I came back to this track. Starts off with a beautiful guitar melody, and then we start to go into these brutal, like, true lyrics about a guy who it's not glorifying heroin,
not at all,
but it's just speaking of it objectively, speaking of what somebody who's addicted to heroin would want to do. And we have some great shifts in tempo here. We go from slower, and again we have that drone of the electric viola in there, and then we go into like more propelling, faster, tempo, almost like I think what a rush of heroin would be like.
Yeah, and I think, Lou talked about that look, he's just, on all these subjects, he's not condoning anything, but he talked about later on, he hardly ever played this song live because he would have people come up to him and tell him, man, I put this song on right before I shoot up, and he was very alarmed by that. But yeah, it is a tremendous track.
And some of the best lyrics, I think, are found on here that probably really relate to people who are struggling with addiction. He notes that I'm going to try and nullify my lie. Heroin be the death of me. Heroin, it's my wife and it's my life. Haha. And at the very end, he just starts to bring it all home. Then thank God that I'm as good as dead, and thank your God that I'm not aware, and thank God that I just don't care. What a wonderful, wonderful tune.
One of the interesting things musically, and Rolling Stone magazine actually pointed this out, of how easy it is to make a really good song, because this song only has 2 chords, even though it takes you on an instrument journey. So I thought that was a fantastic and actually clever way to do things. That's going to take us to There She Goes Again. The guitar riff is actually taken from the 1962 Marvin Gaye song Hitchhike. It's about a prostitute, Trey, and if you read the lyrics, you'll figure that out pretty quickly. I'm not going to go into all those lyrics, but it's a very chilled out vibe compared to Heroin.
Yeah, I thought it played well off the back end of that. Again, a little bit of a Dylan-esque type vocal, in my opinion, and again, gives that grittiness for the taboo subject. Moving on to track number 9.
I'll Be Your Mirror, another Nico-led track. This was the one that said she had the most difficult time recording because she kept wanting to sing it hard and loud, and they kept telling her, no, we want you to sing it in a delicate voice, dial it back. They actually brought her to tears in the studio, and they finally said in their quote, F it, we're going to do this one more time. If she can't do it, we're just not going to record it. And she got it exactly right. And even after she left the band, they liked the way she sang it so well that they tried to mimic her voice, Lou did, on stage when he sang this.
Yeah, and it really has a great message, a bit more, probably the most upbeat type of a message and happy message on this entire album, because it notes that whenever your love or somebody is feeling down, you'll be their mirror to show them how beautiful that they actually are whenever they can't see that in themselves.
Everybody needs that.
Yeah.
Needs that person. That brings us to the Black Angels Death Song. Reed and Cale wrote this one. Reed said the idea here was to string words together for the sheer fun of their sound, not any particular meaning. The big thing on this is Cale's viola just kind of hammering through on this.
Yeah, that going in, along with we had like some steam effects, kind of put you in the streets of kind of New York City.
Yeah,
that
did a good job of setting the scene.
Yeah, urban type of feel to it. And here it was one of the more impressive displays, I think, by Reed, just because he packs a lot of lyrics into, a great wordplay. So I appreciated it for that. And then we move on to the final track, European Sun. And this was the longest track on the record.
It was very long, 7 minutes, 7.5.
Yeah, and a bit more, experimental, because it starts off almost like 50s type of rock and roll type of tune. We just get like a little over a minute's worth of lyrics.
Yeah, they're just two tiny verses, like if you look at them, yeah.
And then we just go into just a crazy amount of distortion, feedback, a lot of guitar effects. It kind of reminds you of just like some proto-punk music, a little bit of noise rock.
Yeah.
I could, just hear how a lot of bands later on were probably influenced by this
Very
track.
gutsy to do that. At the very end, that's the last thing you leave people with.
And usually if I heard this track, I wouldn't be a huge fan of it, but I think it did fit perfect, though, because this album is pretty unconventional. So to end this record off with something that was very unconventional for 1967, I thought it fit it perfectly, just kind of the craziness at the end. And one of the last lines is, "You better say so long, your clowns bid you goodbye." There is a fan theory out there that this is one like continuous story that where a guy starts off on a Sunday morning going to see his drug dealer, his female drug dealer, who's actually his love. In FEMME FATALE, we had the clown line in here. It comes back. Whether there's any validity to that, who knows? But I could definitely see it, and it's kind of fun. I always like to discuss stuff like that. But then that'll move us into our favorite tracks.
Well, for me, I actually have a lot of them, but I'll go with Sunday Morning, I'll go with Heroin, and I'll go with I'll Be Your Mirror.
All right, I'm going to back those up. I also am going to throw in Run, Run, Run as well.
I mean, I could throw that in too.
There's a lot of them.
I'm Waiting for the Man,
Yeah, there's a lot of solid tunes on here. And then we'll transition now into our overall score.
Yeah, for me, and it just depends, guys. Sometimes I hear an album and I'm like, I get it right away. I listened to this the first time and I told you, I don't know, man, this was going to have to grow on me. It's fine. I think it's really interesting. This was released in 1967, so it's hard. We're almost at the end of 2019 at the time of recording this, to put yourself in that situation of listening to that and going, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned on that last song, on European Sun, you could hear the influences that so many other genres of music took out of that. We've already heard all those genres. So all that to say, for me, this thing grew on me, and it's still growing on me right now. It was time to record this, and we got to move on. But I'm going to give it an 8.75.
Yeah, I much like you, first time I enjoyed it, but I was like, okay, I kind of need to listen to this again. And the more I listened to it, the more I enjoyed it. And now, I mean, it's one that really just grabbed me. So for me, I got to go with a 9.5 on this.
Wow, that's a good.
I really enjoyed it, loved it. I mean, you think about it in '67, how influential this was. This came out before Sgt. Pepper. I'd argue that it's overall probably a better record than Sgt. Pepper, honestly, just more consistent and probably more influential as a whole, just to different types of genres.
Can't wait for the comments on that one.
Oh, yeah, I got to bring the hot takes
in
here.
Man.
Just as you mentioned at the start, the influence it had on so much alternative music through the years, and I'm could definitely hear that. So really enjoyed this record. I'm excited to see what we get. They don't have that many albums, so we'll be able to bust through them. And as always, Dad, appreciate the research.
This one was real fun.
And let us know what you think of this record in the comments below. And if you enjoy this, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. We upload many times a week in a variety of genres. And until next time, happy listening, my friends. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see ya.